Hey guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Staying Sweet, the podcast. This week's episode is a really lovely one. I have asked for your guys' questions, which is always one of my favourite things to do, over on my personal brand, but it's not something I've done before on the podcast, and I really want to integrate this as a more long-standing opportunity and get more of you guys reaching out and engaging with the podcast. So I have some questions here, and I asked over on my Instagram for you guys to send in any business or career or life around your business related dilemmas, and you have served, so thank you very much. I would love to know if you would be keen to ask away again. What I think I'm going to do is offer regular question boxes, and I'm just going to kind of add those to a pot and then regularly do a podcast episode on your questions and queries and dilemmas so that we can get to the root of the problem and also problem solve together, because a problem shared is a problem halved, and particularly when you're navigating career jumps, hurdles and lessons along the way, I feel like other people's advice is always so beneficial and just makes everything easier. So let's jump straight into this week's episode's questions. And that is the first one being, what should I put on my CV when I haven't had any career experience? This is such a good question. Firstly, thank you for reaching out and asking this one, because I think a lot of people just assume that, you just got to whack whatever on your CV and hope for the best. But there is a way in which you can be much more successful, particularly if you're a graduate and you've got some education under your belt now, or particular work experiences, things like that. Often we don't utilize the skill set that we already have enough, and particularly in the digitally led generation that we're in, a lot of people are highly qualified for social roles or social media roles and skills that are kind of second nature to a lot of people now, but actually still sit under an umbrella of being a hard skill, like editing or scheduling, posting, that type of thing. So I would say use your format to your advantage, and really, when you don't have much experience, make your page look much more appealing by its design and be kind of clever about that. Obviously, not all submission platforms enable you to use like a graphically designed like CV. But I would say, if you can, upload something that is a bit more of a flair of your personality. Obviously, don't go too crazy, but if it's like a typeface that you always use and you're an editor or you're someone in graphic design, think about how you could use your own graphic designs in your CV to really showcase your style and where you'd sit and be positioned in a business. Also looking at their brand image and their brand structure and what kind of message they convey with their product and their, branding themselves. Are they a very stripped back, minimal brand? Use that to your advantage. Put that in your CV and in that design element. If it's a very corporate position, a very corporate job, if it's finance, if it's something that's much more black and white, reflect that in your CV, because often they don't want to see that fluff, and that's why you have to be so lenient with your CV. Never distribute the same CV twice, because often it's not going to fit. There are little tweaks you can do, mixing up your hard and soft skills on the page, and highlighting as many skills as possible that are relevant to the job. If you're someone who has done a bit of experience but not enough to collate and create this amazing CV, you're going to want to fill it with things that you did in your summer, like your summer jobs. I would be careful with this and actually just have a smaller CV and a bigger personal profile on you, kind of detailing what your skill set and your interests are. So for example, I would go in and really focus on the strategy of who I am and what I can provide to a digital business, and look at the rhetoric and the words used in the position that is being shared and published. Often there are words and things that you can include that are part of the overall vibe of the application that you can integrate into your own CV that will make it much easier for you to fill it out and fluff it out. Now, I say fluff it out, but be careful with putting in things that are totally unnecessary to the CV itself. Be careful with that. Have a nice balance. It doesn't need to be an entire page of A4 initially. They're going to understand that you're a graduate, but showcase your passions. Have you got a YouTube channel? Are you going for a video editor role and you already video edit yourself? Showcase that. Give screen grabs maybe, or just give like real-time evidence of what you're doing, because that is going to be so much more beneficial than you writing down that you worked in a cafe for 6 months over summer. Like, the skill set might translate, but it also might not, and it might be totally irrelevant or potentially put off an employer if they're seeing that as face value. The first thing that they're looking at is, a coffee shop job that you worked that has no relevance to what you're doing now. So just consider that. I would say to join the dots between the application and the position. Don't let the employer do the hard work. You need to be presenting the data and the information and your skill set very easily, so that when you're presenting that information, they can read it, they can access it, they can apply it to the role and the position, and they can say, okay, you have this skill set, this can be applied to this can be used in this case, and be someone that shows them rather than expects them to make it clear. Like, you've got to make it clear before you send that CV. Make everything as clear as possible. Use the CV essentially a bit like a cover letter. And if an application requires you to use a cover letter, think carefully about that information. Don't double down and repeat yourself. Use it as a way to say a different element or talk about a different element of you, rather than repeating what's on your cover letter. But if a cover letter isn't required, try and integrate something that you would mention in your cover letter onto your CV, again, just to fill up that space if you're finding it difficult. Be specific, keep it short and sweet, and make sure it's relevant, and show your personality where possible. Next question is one that I love. Do I really need to use LinkedIn? I would say yes. I was someone who was actually quite scared of LinkedIn for a good period of time, and I put it off, I procrastinated it, and I think it came down to me not thinking I was deserving to share my little accolades with the world, because I was self-employed and I was kind of hustling on my own and building a social media platform and growing a podcast, etc. And it wasn't until later down the line that I realised, actually, Alice, working in this industry for nearly 10 years, will you believe it, social media, 10 years of my time and efforts and weekends, evenings, etc., all those moments have grown me as a person, and it shows the dedication and it shows the commitment to something when you're just starting out. If you're somebody who has developed a YouTube channel, or you've done things along the way that kind of go alongside what you're doing, smaller qualifications, or special like media weekends, or special weekends that are dedicated to your craft, mention them, shout out about them. Nothing is too egotistical in the world of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is about shouting about your accolades. It's like your CV on crack. It's like next level. Look at me. This is how I'm working. This is how I'm doing things. And the reason why I was so, let's say, intimidated by it is because I thought, no one's going to care that I have tried to do YouTube, or that I have built a social media platform and have been doing it for 10 years. But actually they do care. And people that are relevant to you, linked in your business, literally linked in, get it? Linked into your business, they are going to want to be able to find you. You need to be discoverable, and your accolades aren't going to be able to be seen if you're not sharing and shouting about it. No one else is going to be as passionate about you as you are. So that's why you've got to do it. I think show your personality, make yourself discoverable, use those hashtags, post regularly. If you're at something or you do something cool that week, and if you get something like Employee of the Week, I'm sure there's businesses that still do something of that nature. Shout about it, be confident, use it to your advantage, because when it comes to that point where maybe you want to reposition yourself or you want to get a new job, you have accolades under your belt and people will be able to find you. So that's my little TED talk on LinkedIn. I really want to do a separate podcast on LinkedIn specifically, because there are so many ways that you can leverage yourself. You can SEO the hell out of that platform and you can become discoverable. It was crazy how much just changing my banner on my LinkedIn and a couple of hashtags in my profile that I get weekly emails from people asking to come on this podcast. So it clearly has a positive SEO structure because I'm finding people who are relevant to my industry, and ultimately that's what you want. So definitely, I think you really need to use LinkedIn. The next question is one that I relate to and have related to many a time, and I feel like it's really vulnerable of you to reach out and exchange this. But someone has asked, I feel lost in my career. I'm mid-20s and not sure if the job I'm doing makes me happy. Advice. So I would say when you're feeling lost in your career, look at the skills that you've already got and do like an umbrella and a mind map and a brainstorm and look at all the different things and all the different avenues that you could potentially go with that skill set. Follow your nose, and what I mean by that is you're going to mind map out stuff. One particular skill is going to mind map out and mind map out and mind map out to an even bigger picture, something far more detailed and in-depth than you might have thought. That is usually the nose for excitement, passion. Follow that nose for passion because you will never be led down a dead end. There will always be a point where you can pivot into something else. And I've had that many times in my career. I've done the writing side of things. I've done social media, and I've talked about this on the podcast before. I initially started and posted a lot of stuff on fashion. And actually for me, that led me down like a social media dead end. I didn't really want to do it anymore. I didn't want to be in fashion necessarily. I wanted to highlight my work as a journalist and as someone in broadcast. And okay, that's doable. We can pivot that. You can still show up and be fashionable, but you don't have to talk about fashion. You can talk about being a woman in business. And that's why we're here. And I feel like there are so many different ways that you can make things work. It's just about mind mapping out, branching out. I would also say that the purpose of your 20s, and again, I've touched on this on an episode, I believe it was episode 48, which was about identity capital, expanding your purpose by finding passions in other things outside of your work. So for me, my line of work is writing, photography, and podcasting. Okay, those are great skills, great things that light me up, but I should really be trying some different things. Like this past year, I've joined a snorkeling club, I've joined a running club, I've just decided to start new hobbies, and in doing that, have opened my eyes to new opportunities and new ways in, new communities of people, and I've been able to tap into those people. So when I've often felt lost, it's been a reflection of other areas of my life making me feel lost as a whole. And I feel like we put a lot of pressure, particularly on relationships and career, to get those two things really solid. And actually, sometimes it's other things in that circle of life that we need to work on and focus on. And my biggest advice, I think, do an audit on your current life. And I've talked about this before, but what you're going to do is create these like rings all the way out. I feel like I have the template. I'll link it below in the description and in the show notes. And it basically rings itself out, and you'll label each segment like a pizza. You'll label each segment with a different area of your life. So you'll have career, you'll have health, you'll have finances, relationships, friendships, free time, travel, whatever. Pick your labels. Then you're going to go in and you're going to colour up all the things, like a bit like a graph and a bar, and you're going to go through, get your little bar chart skills going, guys, bring out that skill and go through and colour in, and you're going to look at what is, taking up your time, what you're filling up the most, what you're doing the most in those areas. And then you're going to compare and you're going to go, okay, well, I've put a lot of money into my savings and I've been really investing, but actually my social life has been lacking lately. So, okay, what could I be doing to fill that cup back up? Could I be making some plans with some friends that I've not seen in a while because I've been too busy saving money? Those different things, look into those and see if you can balance out that circle. And often I find in doing that really helps me. I check in regularly. I'm actually due for a checkup. I'm due for an audit very soon, so I'll be doing that over the winter break. But yeah, I really do find it fascinating and a really helpful, beneficial tool to kind of measuring what you're putting your energy into, and it can really help steer you into a better direction. The next question that I received was things you wish you knew sooner when starting your social media / starting a page. So I would say the biggest number one thing is to know your why and to be open to evolving and pivoting so you naturally find that organic place of passion. Because I've said this before and I've said this earlier, when you start to grow in a particular place, there's other avenues and other doors that often open themselves up and present themselves. Starting this podcast, I didn't realize how much I would love interviewing, and I do already interview. I interview for magazines, and I've done many write-ups, many cover stories, many interviews, and celebrity profiles. But it took a few years for the cogs to turn and for me to apply this into my own thing and create this podcast. So when you're creating something like a social media platform and a page, think about the now, of course, but think about the future vision for yourself, and think about where that person is going to be in a few years' time. Also consider boundaries. I would say I wish I had stronger boundaries initially, been careful with who I worked with, who I collaborated with, like brand wise. I mean, if you're thinking about collaborating with like a fashion brand, does it align with you? Is it ethical? If it's something like sharing and oversharing, we've mentioned this again on previous episodes, people will know stuff about you. So get used to that feeling. Don't be afraid of it, but also think carefully about how you're going to present that data to those people. How are you going to show up? Because ultimately you're sharing you with the world, and people are going to take a slice, whether you like it or not. The next question, kind of linked to what I was just saying there. How do you feel so confident interviewing people? A lot of experience, practice, and preparation is probably the biggest one. Doing my research. Sometimes I've had interviews with people I've not known a clue about, but they're famous or they're big in their industry, and rightfully so. But the only way to really be confident in the interview and for the interview to go well is to do your research and be prepared to have a slightly awkward conversation, because sometimes interviews are a little bit like give and take, but at the same time they can be very one-sided in that the person you're interviewing has a formula, a response that they're used to, and they control the direction. And actually what you want to do as the interviewer is position yourself to control the interview, and not in a bad way control it, but just help along the narrative and help that person open up so you get the good quotes. Because there's nothing worse than doing an interview and they say exactly the same thing to two other magazines on the couch, and you're left feeling like, well, that was pointless because I've left with no new information. People have already spoken about this. I've got nothing new from this. And yeah, I think when you have a predetermined flow and like a story arc, it helps so much with the conversation. And let that person lead. If they flow into something else, allow them to do so, but don't cut them off, because that's going to stunt the conversation. It might trip you up. And sometimes the best way to evolve and allow the interview to be something as confident as people perceive it is to let the person talk and give the person a minute to take the stage and flow the conversation. Because sometimes you might find your questions might cut someone off and give them, not much wriggle room to evolve their answer. Whereas when they're naturally in a flow state and conversing with you, they might open into other avenues. So that's worth noting. The next question, lots of journalism questions, which I'm excited to see, is was it worth it getting a degree in journalism? Now, I graduated from Kingston University in 2018, and I would say yes, my degree was worth getting, but I would say everything I have now is not because of my degree. I didn't actually learn the skills of this. This is all self-taught. I've edited myself from the beginning. I also have worked in magazines and publications based off of my own drive and get up and go to secure those roles. I would say that if you're someone who is deliberating it because of the financial aspect of university rather than the social aspect, I would consider, doing an NCTJ qualification over a degree. I think maybe I would be in a different financial position now if I'd done that. But again, there's not many conversations about it. I feel like a lot of things that I was discovering about journalists was really old fashioned, and it was like much older people talking about degrees and working in journalism, and it was very like black and white newspaper thinking. And journalism has really evolved so much even since I've graduated. The way that the digital platforms have evolved, magazines are very socially focused, social media heavy, they all have social media teams. Those did not exist, or they were still just emerging when I was at university, and to see how they have completely shaped and transformed the journalism space is really interesting. I also think if you're someone that, both if you're going to do a degree and not do a degree, consider finding a mentor and find those people that are going to support you and be on the same like wavelength as you, because there's nothing worse, well, not nothing worse, I don't want to say it like that, but you can obviously always learn from someone who's very different from you. But if there is someone who gets it and gets what you're trying to get out of your career, that is going to be someone who is much more aligned to you than someone that, doesn't believe in social media or has a very old-fashioned way of thinking. It might be good initially, but actually, is that going to stunt your performance and your development? I know that I would absolutely love to mentor some of you, and it's something that has always been on my mind, is something that I'd want to do. I'm definitely open to offers. To anyone who might want to be mentored, please reach out, drop me an email, everything's in the show notes, or drop me a DM on Instagram at Staying Sweet Podcast, and we can discuss our options, because I'd love to do it. I think, you can go in and think, oh, have I got enough knowledge about this to be a mentor? But actually, sometimes it's just being a support system and a friend in an industry. And I'd love to be someone like that. And I think that's why really this podcast established itself. So yeah, definitely consider that. If you're someone that wants to work with me closely, please do drop me a message and I would love to work with you, or at least discuss working with you. My next question, and I've got two more questions. Biggest career regret. Oh dear, where do we go here? I think my biggest career regret was probably trying to do and be everything. Be a one-man band, and I say it a lot. I am a one-man band in a lot of things, but I was trying to do everything. Be an all singing, all dancing. I can do this. I can say yes to this. I can do this. I'll put my hand up. I'll take the opportunity because I'm too scared to miss out. And actually, what that does is thins out your time, thins out your motivation. You're getting to that point where you're trying to do too much that actually you can't put your all into one thing. So that is definitely a big regret of mine. I don't really like to use the word regret because it seems like a turn back time kind of situation. But going forward, I definitely am very careful with the projects that I take on. I think my next point would be not networking more in my very early career, or not really knowing how to. Like, I did network, but I don't think I realized the potential and like how to harness the people that I was in rooms with. Like, I think back to some of the crazy things I was doing at like 18, 19 years old in journalism. And it was like I was in this room with editors and I didn't really talk to them. I was too scared and too shy. So if you're going on things like trips or events, or you're networking, or you're going to be at an event with big people, have questions lined in your back pocket or like on your phone notes. Know what you're going to say. Prepare for your experiences. Prepare for things. I did events, and I spoke to someone actually today about this. I went to a business studies or like business course on Kingston campus for an editor at the time for Harrods magazine, and it actually wasn't a talk for our students, it was a talk for business studies students, and I still attended it. I brought my CV along, I printed out my CV, and I handed my CV over to the editor at the time, and I ended up getting an internship there. So I think preparation is the biggest thing. Don't make the mistake of being underprepared, and that goes across to everything, interviewing techniques, having your CV ready to go. Always have an up-to-date CV. Even if you feel secure in your job, you never know what could be around the corner. It could be, redundancy or something like that, or being pushed out of a business, or it could be that you find your dream job or you find an opportunity and you want to have your CV ready. You want to be ready and raring to go to present yourself with those things. And I think finally, career regret, maybe not setting clearer boundaries with my social media, sharing too much and not setting that clear boundary about who I wanted to come across as. It's not to say that it's being fake or not being genuine, but it's just saying, actually, do you know what? I'm keeping this part of my life private, and that's okay. But yeah, I would say those are my regrets, really. And the final question, guys, which I think is such a good question to ask: business trends that you think will emerge in 2024. Now, I had to have a think about this, and I did actually have to write some things down because I think a lot is going to be changing in the next year. I mean, we've already seen it this year with the rise of AI, and I'm going to say this as an unfortunately, in my view, I think unfortunately more AI. I don't think there are enough positives to go around with AI. I think there's going to be a lot of things coming out about that space and how that's going to impact people's workflow, both in the ability to hand off the work to a piece of technology and not really thinking about stuff, doing stuff sort of half-assed rather than like fully focused. But I also think as well it's going to remove the ability of free think and problem solving, independently of a piece of technology. I think there's beauty in conversation and in meeting people and, talking through problems and resolving them in an organic way versus asking a computer generated software to give you an answer, because often it's bland or it's directionless. It's just formulaic. And I think that's going to cause some issues, I think, next year. I think we're going to see a lot of people using AI, but as AI continues to grow, I think things like soft skills are going to be front and center of your CV. So I think although we're going to be seeing these hybrid remote working spaces continue to grow, like co-working spaces grow, there is still a gap between the trust element within businesses. And I did see a stat, and I've read a stat from Work Trend Index about this, that says only 12% of employers have full confidence in their employees to remain at full capacity and be at full productivity. And I think there's a level of truth there. The fact that 12% have full trust, like, that is crazy to me, but I kind of get it. But in the same breath, I think when people are doing their 1 or 2 days a week in office, they're also reporting back that people are just having conversations. I think people are really missing the human aspect of being in a business and working in a company. And it's about striking that balance, because there are benefits to working from home, no commute times. Before I was commuting into London 5 days a week, and that was not financially sustainable. And actually that was demotivating me. But also coming into work and working, can we problem solve quicker? Can we have conversations? Can we iron out things much quicker than over email or scheduling in for a call when we're in person? But then in the same breath, I think, people are going into work and finding themselves distracted because everyone's catching up with each other and they're missing that human connection. So I think there's going to be a real pivot in how we work in the next year, and that's going to be really interesting to see. I think we're going to continue to see authentic content creation with brands more so than creators. Creators are already doing it, but I think brands are going to be kind of opening up more, talking about the struggles of their business, or at least pretending to kind of give that consumer voice a bit more of an authentic tone. I think we're also going to be seeing social searching increasing, so people preferring and steering towards Google searching over on platforms like TikTok. Less so on Instagram, but still possible. I think TikTok has really taken the lead here. has a search engine tool, you know, how to cook a chicken. I'm not going to Google that. I'm going to go on TikTok. I mean, I don't even eat meat, guys, but I might be cooking for someone who's coming round and gosh, it's been years since I've eaten meat. I need to look this up quickly. What am I going to use? I'm going to use a 10-second or a minute long video versus scrolling on the internet trying to find the right thing or something that's presenting itself in the right metrics, for example, like a British recipe over a US recipe, those types of things. I think we're really going to see social searching improve. So if you are a business that is problem solving and solving an issue, you know, think about how you can answer those questions. Think about what people are typing into Google, make them on TikTok, translate that over there. Same with your content creation. You know, are you answering questions to things? Are you doing Q&As? I should be putting this on my TikTok, which I will be, in the form of a short mini clip to entice you guys to listen to my podcast. So everything's going to be really quite cyclical in that sense. I think social searching is going to rise, and I think businesses across all different spheres, personal brands and, you know, companies, services, etc., are going to be using TikTok. I think TikTok is going nowhere. We're going to see that pivot and change and the trends evolve as they do month by month. Sounds come in, trending audios come in, we ride those waves, but we also need to think about long-standing longevity in our business as well. But those were really interesting questions, guys. Thank you so much for asking away. Please do send in your questions. In the meantime, you can do that over on my Instagram at Staying Sweet Podcast, or you can head over and email me directly if there's something you want me to answer in more detail, or if you've got a long in-depth dilemma, like I want to answer those. So please ask away. Obviously business and career focus, please. You know, I'd love to help with like all things relationship and friendships and all sorts, but focusing in on sort of business, career and all those elements alongside that, I would be more than happy to help you. But thank you so much, guys, for tuning in and listening. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for joining, and I really hope this episode has been inspiring and answering your questions. Please do give a rate and review, subscribe if you're on YouTube, like the video, and I will see you guys next week for a brand new episode. Stay sweet.